Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. The waiter had just set the candle between us when she leaned back, folded her linen napkin with the precision of a judge handing down a sentence, and said, "Yes, I cheat on you with him, and I regret absolutely nothing." She didn't whisper. She wanted the room to hear it, to let the tiled floor and the tall windows carry her triumph to every table. My wife, I thought, even as the word felt like a coat I'd already hung on a hook and left behind, sneered as she left our anniversary dinner with him. She rose in one smooth motion, shrugged into her coat without looking at me, and glanced at the mirror behind my shoulder to fix a strand of hair. He was already waiting near the door, a man who wore arrogance like cologne, checking his reflection in the glass of the wine cabinet. They didn't hurry. They moved like people crossing a stage during a standing ovation that they believed they deserved. I didn't chase her. I didn't ask why. The questions had been answered weeks ago, and the only thing left for me tonight was to pay the bill and thank the staff who had set our table with white peonies because the reservation noted 10 years. 10 years of vacations, shared calendars, burned toast, birthday mornings, tired evenings, light laughter over laundry. 10 years that turned to paper ash the moment she wrapped her hand around his elbow and lifted her chin at me as if I were a valet who had parked the wrong car. I laughed, not loud, not cruel. A simple, breathy chuckle that the candle caught and wavered at, because the line I'd rehearsed in my head finally slid into place. Excellent. Tomorrow's delivery will be quite the shock, a moment I had been waiting for ages. The waiter, poor kid, hesitated. He looked at the door, then at me. "Sir," he said softly, do you need—" "I need dessert," I said, and he blinked. "And then I'll settle up." He brought a tart with glazed lemon slices shining like coins. I took one bite I could barely taste and set the fork down. Across the room, a couple pretended not to look our way. Someone whispered. The piano in the corner paused, the pianist aware of a scene closing and another about to start. 10 years. People think betrayal arrives like thunder. Mine crept in with little things. Messages with muted notifications, perfumes that didn't belong to our home, a new ringtone that sounded like a bell I couldn't place. She started calling me by my name instead of the nicknames we'd built. At first, I told myself the story couples always tell. Busy season, fatigue, routines grinding down spark. Yet even busy seasons end. Fatigue lifts. Only routines remained, and even they began to feel staged. 2 months ago, a colleague named Dana saw them at a street fair near the river. She told me because she thought I should know. Her voice had the careful sympathy of someone afraid a truth might shatter a glass. I listened. I thanked her. I walked home slower than usual and felt strangely, like a lock finally clicking open. I didn't confront anyone. Not right away. Instead, I did something unbearably boring. I called my therapist and moved our sessions from as needed to every week. I needed my anger to turn into something I could pick up without bleeding. Next, I called Ms. Patel, who handles contracts for the logistics company I run with my brother. She is a quiet genius who thinks in flowcharts. I explained that I anticipated some personal turbulence and needed to make a few adjustments. Titles shifted. Access narrowed. Accounts that had been shared for convenience became private again. None of it was vindictive. It was housekeeping that should have happened ages ago. Then I called my grandmother. She's 90 and still makes soup whenever the weather looks undecided. "So," she said, after I spoke for a long time, "you're telling me the house is on fire and you're standing outside with a hose and a sandwich. Good, eat the sandwich, spray the hose. Don't run back in to save the curtains." That's the thing about wisdom. It doesn't need many words. The man at the door tonight, his name is Tom. I learned it from a photo my wife once received and forgot to delete from the cloud folder we still shared. In it, he posed beside a conference banner with graphics promising innovation. He sells ideas for improving warehouse throughput, makes videos with upbeat music, and does that thing with his hands where every sentence has a little drum roll before it. On paper, he looked harmless. In person, he carried himself like someone led by applause. Tonight, as she glided to him, I memorized the scene only so I could file it away and never take it out again. Tomorrow, the box would arrive at our apartment. A simple brown crate with a printed label and a tamper seal that would be unbroken when the courier knocked. Another box, identical, would arrive at her office. A third, smaller, more ceremonial, would go to Tom's consulting suite, where a woman named Gina at reception had the kind voice of someone who doesn't get paid nearly enough to manage men who measure their value in billable hours. Inside the box to our apartment, 3 neat stacks. The first a set of printed photographs from 10 years, each one slipped into a glass-lined sleeve. Train platforms, a picnic on our 3rd summer, the time we both dyed our fingers blue from a farmer's market berries binge. Under each photo, a sticky note in my handwriting that said, "Keep or toss, your choice." The second stack, letters I'd written her during our first years, bound with twine and a single dried rosemary sprig, because we used to joke that every recipe we cooked together began with heat oil, add garlic, add rosemary, argue, make up. The third, a document prepared by Ms. Patel and my divorce attorney, smooth as a freshly ironed shirt. An uncontested separation agreement, division of assets detailed down to the last kitchen knife. Rights explained without venom. Lines that anticipated questions before they could become flames. I could have gone for spectacle. People do. They write public posts, they gather friends and make speeches. They make videos with dramatic music and text overlays. I wanted no audience beyond the lives actually affected. Public drama feeds on humiliation. Private dignity tastes like water on a hot day. The box headed to her office contained copies of the same agreement and a handwritten note clipped to the top. "Please sign when ready. We will handle everything through counsel. There's no rush. Take the time you need. E." That's what I wanted written there. Not revenge that would make her small. Closure that would keep me human. Tom's box, however, held something different. Not poison. Not threats. Just a checkmate I'd arranged on a chessboard he didn't know existed. Months before, my company had been negotiating a contract with a regional fulfillment network to overhaul their routing. They'd hired Tom's firm to design the plan. They'd hired ours to make it real. I stayed out of the meetings by choice. I didn't want work to mingle with what was beginning to unravel at home. But after Dana told me what she saw at the street fair, I studied every page in the client's folder. I found a pattern that had bothered me earlier. Proposals padded with buzzwords, timelines that looked amazing until you compared them with how many staff the client actually had, and a strategic partner clause that steered work toward Tom's firm regardless of performance. Legal didn't love it. The client didn't notice. I noticed. So I did what good logistics people do. I mapped a simpler route. Over 6 quiet weeks, I called 3 smaller firms who had done solid work for us. I asked them for sober proposals with clear milestones and no confetti. Then I called the client's COO and requested a private lunch. I brought data and a calm tone. I showed her the padded timelines and the performance clauses and the faces of people who could do the job with less glamour and more grit. I didn't mention my personal connection to any of this. She listened. She asked hard questions. 2 days later, she wrote my brother and me to say they'd be revisiting vendor assignments and appreciated our candor. I didn't remove Tom's firm. I didn't need to. The client would decide. I simply pulled back the curtain so everyone could see what stood there under the lights. A plan better in pitch than delivery. If they chose him, so be it. We'd work beside him and keep things professional. If they didn't, then tomorrow's delivery at his office, an embossed envelope containing a new vendor list, would be the first he learned of it. Petty? That's the word some might use. I call it alignment. No drama, just daylight. There was more. A delivery scheduled to the small community kitchen 2 blocks from our place, the place where my wife used to teach kids to bake scones on Saturday mornings, when we were still building a life, when our biggest argument had been whether to keep the chipped mug with sunflowers. I made a donation in her name and mine, enough to cover a semester of classes and new mixers that didn't sputter. The press release would go out in the morning. The director would send her a thank you email, and maybe she'd remember how she'd smiled there in a flour-dusted apron. Not for a camera, not for applause, just because kids laughed when dough stuck to their fingers and life felt full and unperformed. That memory deserved a soft light, not a bonfire. I signed the check, finished the lemon tart, and stood. The pianist started playing again, something slow that sounded like rain against a bus window. I left a tip for the waiter that made him blink again and stammer, "Sir, that's too much." and I told him no, it wasn't, because he had lit a candle and set peonies on a table for two and watched a stranger swallow pride like a dry pill. Outside, the evening carried a polite chill. I walked home because I needed the air. Neon from the pharmacy spilled onto the sidewalk. A dog barked once and then reconsidered. A couple shared one scarf and moved like a single person with 4 feet. The city hummed its usual nonchalance. You are not the center. We all have our dramas. Take a number, carry on. At home, the apartment looked exactly like it always had at this hour. A lamp casting a triangle of light onto the rug, a stack of mail on the hall table, the faint citrus scent of the cleaner Rosa uses on Tuesdays. There are houses that keep secrets and houses that keep time. Ours had become the latter. Every object gathered the day's dust without judgment. I made tea. I sat by the window. I pictured her with him, not because I enjoyed the image, but because refusing to picture it always made it grow larger in the dark. Then I let the image pass through like weather. I didn't inspect every raindrop. I focused on the forecast instead. Tomorrow at 9, the courier would roll his cart through our lobby with the first box and hand it to the concierge with a polite smile that says, "This is just a job." Tomorrow at 10, Gina at Tom's office would page him and say a courier had arrived. Tomorrow at 10:30, an email would land in my wife's inbox from the community kitchen, subject line, "Thank you." Tomorrow at noon, a calendar event titled Lunch with Counsel would pop up on my phone and hers, because I still had access to our shared calendar and used it only for this one thing. I poured the tea over the sink because it tasted like lemons from the dessert and I'd had enough lemons for one night. Then I opened the closet and started the small ritual that marks the return from an ending. I took down a suitcase and filled it with what I would need for a week. Not because she would storm in and demand I leave. She had walked out as though she'd already left months ago. I packed because I wanted to see who I was when I had fewer objects around me. I put in soft shirts and one sweater my grandmother gave me with sleeves that made my hands disappear. I added the book I'd been saving for a vacation we never took, a quiet novel about a lighthouse and a letter found in a wall. I put the wedding album on the top of the suitcase and then took it out again and slipped it onto the shelf where we keep board games. It could sit with Scrabble and chess where it belonged, a game we had once been good at and sometimes cheated in the harmless ways couples do. Double counting a word, pretending not to see a move, until someone decided that the game itself wasn't enough any longer. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "You humiliated yourself tonight." I stared at the words. I thought of the candlelight rocking and the pianist pausing, the waiter hovering like a small planet unsure where to orbit. I typed, "Rest well," and nothing more. I didn't send anything sharp because sharpness is a habit, and habits make patterns, and patterns build houses you don't want to live in. When I finally lay down, sleep took its time. Thoughts formed queues and argued over who would speak. A memory slipped forward. The morning we picked up our dog from the shelter. We had him 3 years before he went old all at once, as some creatures do. He'd pressed his whole small body against our shins when the volunteer opened the kennel, as if he planned to melt through our bones into our blood. He had a scar on his ear that made him look perpetually curious. That morning was ordinary as bread and somehow sacred. Why do the ordinary days glow so much brighter in hindsight than the parties and the milestones? Maybe because ordinary days guard the quiet parts of love, while celebrations sometimes poke it for entertainment. The sun arrived like it always does, politely pulling gray into gold. I woke before the alarm, and instead of waiting for today to begin, I went to meet it. I set out 2 mugs and then put one back. Old habits require you to carry them gently to the door and wave as they go. I sent an email to Ms. Patel to confirm the courier's schedule. Her instant reply came with a small thumbs-up emoji that I had never seen her use. People surprise you. At 8:15, Rosa texted to ask if I needed her to come today, and I told her to take the day off, and that her last paycheck had a little extra in it because she had listened once when I needed to talk about nothing important and everything important at the same time. She sent a heart. I sent one back, because mature men can be sentimental without combusting. At 8:45, I stepped into the hallway as our elevator opened and the courier rolled out the first box. He nodded. We'd worked together before when the company used our building's ground floor for holiday drives. He handed me the signature tablet. His finger hovered above the name field when the lobby doors swung and the concierge called, "Delivery for 12B as well." 12B meant her office copy had arrived early and they wanted to forward it. Timelines were dancing as they always do when wheels get involved. I signed. The courier set the box beside the elevator. "Want me to take it up?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'll wheel it. I like the sound the casters make on the hallway rug." He laughed because it was a strange thing to say, but true. There's a sound to endings. Not only shouts or slammed doors. Sometimes it's the soft rattle of a cart doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I rolled the box down the long hallway with its framed travel posters from places we never went. Kyoto in spring, a slow canal in Amsterdam, a cabin half buried in snow. Inside the apartment, I set the box by the dining table. The peonies were still in the vase from last week's market run, a shade of white that made all the plates look startled. The envelope on top of the stack had my name and hers written side by side one last time. I touched each letter the way people touch doorways when they leave. Not superstitious, just acknowledging wood and weight. My phone lit again. Her name. A new message. "We'll talk when I'm ready," I typed. "The paperwork is straightforward. Read it with someone you trust. No rush." I erased "no rush" and wrote it again. There are phrases that feel like bridges. They let people cross without waiting. 9 o'clock struck, and with it that crisp sensation that schedules bring. Somewhere across town, Gina would be paging Tom. "You have a courier here." Somewhere else, a small kitchen would be opening a new mixer box and smiling at the instruction manual like it was a love letter from a future batch of students. Somewhere quiet between those places, a woman would open an envelope and see a decade arranged into stacks, each one an offering, each one a way of saying, "Here is what we were. Here is how we end without wreckage." I sat at the table and opened a notebook. On the first page I wrote, "What am I without her?" And on the next page I wrote, "What am I with myself?" Then I listed small answers that felt like pebbles in a pocket. I am the man who says please to the barista even when the cafe is loud. I am the man who returns carts to the corral in the grocery store parking lot, even when rain taps at my collar. I am the man who laughs quietly in restaurants when people try to use humiliation as theater and discover the stage lights aren't as warm as they hoped. I closed the notebook when the intercom buzzed. The concierge said, "Sir, there's a woman downstairs asking if she can come up to speak with you. She says she's a friend." The world paused a fraction, like the pianist last night. My throat did the thing it does when adrenaline introduces itself. "Name?" I asked. "Dana," he said. "She brought muffins." "Please send her up," I said, and stood. The day would continue, with muffins and signatures and maybe tears and certainly silences. Some of it would hurt. Some of it would taste like lemon. Most of it would feel like carrying a box whose weight doesn't change while your grip on it grows stronger. Tomorrow's delivery will be quite the shock, I had told myself, and it would be. But the quiet delivery that mattered most had already arrived, the one in which I handed a version of myself back to me, intact, steady, still able to laugh in softly lit rooms and pay the bill and walk home through a city that never considers your heartbreak a parade. When the knock sounded, I opened the door to Dana's concerned eyes and her lopsided smile. "I brought the kind with blueberries," she said. "They stain everything and make you forgive life for it." I stepped aside and let her into the bright kitchen where a brown box waited like a patient messenger, where peonies watched over the table, and where a new beginning didn't ask for applause. It simply asked for attention, and I had that to give. The knock at the door had been Dana with her lopsided smile and a box of blueberry muffins. But what arrived after her was not muffins or sympathy. It was the sound of consequences unfolding. By noon, my phone buzzed with a string of notifications. First, the community kitchen posted their announcement. New mixers, more classes, a program expansion in our names. Comments bloomed beneath it, people tagging her, thanking her, recalling how much she had meant to that place years ago. For a moment, I wondered if she smiled when she saw it, or if she grimaced because it was a reminder of the self she had abandoned. Either way, the world remembered a kinder version of her, and that memory would not vanish so easily. At 1 o'clock, an email from my attorney confirmed she had received her copy of the agreement. "No fury, no denial," he wrote. Just a reply. Understood. That was her entire response. A single word. the same one she had used to close our arguments when she didn't want to talk anymore. Only now it carried no heat, no victory, just acknowledgement. The signature would come soon enough. She had no reason to fight. I had given her none. Then, mid-afternoon, word came from the client. A revised vendor list, delivered with careful corporate phrasing. After careful review, we've decided to partner exclusively with your firm moving forward. No mention of Tom's, no excuses, just a clean decision. By the time he opened his box at the office, the email had already spread through his team. His receptionist, Gina, forwarded me a message she thought I should see. He stormed out. Haven't seen him this shaken. A man who had strutted out of the restaurant last night on my wife's arm had walked back into his office to discover applause had been replaced by silence. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but the truth was different. It felt like balance had been restored. Not gloating, not revenge as people imagine it, but a leveling of the scales. Choices have weight, and sooner or later they settle where they belong. Evening came quietly. Dana and I sat with tea while the city dimmed outside. She asked if I was all right. I told her the truth. I don't know what I am yet, but I'm lighter. She nodded, and in the silence that followed, I realized how rare it is to sit across from someone who asks nothing more than honesty. When the phone finally lit up again, it wasn't her or Tom, but my grandmother. Her voice crackled, firm as always. So, did the fire burn itself out? I smiled into the receiver. Yes, I said. And I think the curtain survived after all. She laughed, that deep sound of a woman who had outlived storms bigger than mine. Good, she said. Now go make soup. That's how we keep going. That night, I stood in the kitchen stirring broth. The apartment was still half hers, half mine, but for the first time, it felt wholly mine in spirit. The peonies on the table leaned toward the lamplight. The brown courier box gone. The silence no longer heavy, but clear. I lifted a spoon, tasted the soup, and knew. Endings don't need fireworks. Sometimes the softest conclusion is the strongest. And somewhere across the city, my wife sat with the man she thought was her victory, both of them staring at losses they never expected. I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to hear the arguments. I had what I wanted. Not their downfall, but my freedom. The story was finished. And in the quiet of that night, I finally turned the page.